Hello, good afternoon. I wouldn't say ladies and gentlemen because that sounds too old, and I believe we're a young generation in this room. So, hello, welcome to our session. I promise to make it more interesting, more meaningful because, it's like lunchtime on a Sunday, so it's siesta time. So, before I put you to bed, let me share an interesting and insightful and fruitful, hopefully fruitful conversation with most prominent figures in Southeast Asia. So please welcome from Indonesia, Bapak Hilmar Farid, a historian, cultural researcher, and founder of Jalin Indonesia. Selamat datang, Pak Hilmar. And then from Cambodia, Sobhip Chi, Executive Director of Bovana Center. Welcome, Sobhip. And from Malaysia, a film director and publisher, Sarah Louis Dorai. Sarah, please join us. And last but not least, from Brunei, we have Nur Akilah Ali, a director and researcher of Kitani Kreatif. So this is an almost equal representation of gender, me excluded. And but one thing that is like, we call it in Indonesia, but the benang merah, the red thread of everyone on stage here, is basically we have passion to preserve our culture, our heritage, and also want to push out, not only, gatekeeping it in Indonesia or in Cambodia or in Malaysia or Brunei, but also how to push it out so people in the world knows better of us, right? So I think I would like to start maybe with you, Hilmar, just because we met when Hilmar was still in the Ministry of Education and Culture. So I know this is one of a public official who actually cares about what he's doing, if you understand what I mean.
And the others don't?
This is recorded, so we can edit it at any time during the editing process. So, okay, this is the same question goes to you all, okay? Why don't you share, starting with you, Pa, starting with you, what do you think about Indonesian culture or your heritage, your culture, that people need to know, even it's Indonesian or whoever? Also goes to you. What do you think about Cambodia that people need to know that you think that they don't know yet? And this is something that is personal to each one of you. Please, you can start with you first.
First of all, thank you very much for coming to this session. So to start, I think you are all familiar with the wayang dances, temples and all that, so I'm not going into that. But I think we can start from a fact that Indonesia is one of the three largest biocultural diversity in the world. Yeah. And there's so much to know about it. And what I'm particularly interested in is to see a connection of how people, indigenous communities in particular, are interacting with nature. And there's so much to learn from that. Cannot give you an example because without taking the risk of being just to the diversity that we have, but stick from Kalimantan, Borneo, our neighbors. There's a rich culture in how people relate to the forest. And I think we, modern societies nowadays who are so far away from traditional lifestyle and all that, need to learn more, especially in the context of the climate crisis of today, right? So if you relate to the forest and think of the forest as being a sentient being, not as an object that you can exploit, then you can take a different approach. And this is, I think, one of the most important things to learn today from the indigenous cultures. So,
that's something that we need to put out there. What about from you, Sophie, from Cambodia?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me here. Actually, the question is something very, I don't know how to pick because
so
culture,
many, right?
there's so many. Yeah, but Cambodia is not just known for its temple of Angkor Wat, which is 1,000 years ago, but Cambodia is also carry historical trauma that happened between 1975 to 1979, the time where the communist movement took power and take life of 2 million people among 7 million. So one-third of population lost their lives during this period of time. So most people, the people who survive this killing field carry a lot of trauma with them. And then the young generation who grew up after the killing field have a big gap connecting to this kind of thing. So parents or grandparents carry trauma and have less space to speak to their children, and their children know nothing. Yeah. So there is a big problem of connecting. That's why I don't know what we can do, but many initiatives were made in order to reconnect to this. That's why Bupana, where I work for, was established in order to try to reconstruct the memory that has almost been erased during the genocide and also other 3 decades of civil war. So there are many things, like Professor said, that very diverse, in the region. And Cambodia also, we have diversity of indigenous people. We have around 24 groups of indigenous people there, but among this group, only around 19 languages are spoken, but there is no written form. They are in the critical situation of being endangered because there is no written form. Yeah. So we do some work to support that. Let's elaborate after.
Right, yes. Okay. Sarah.
Thank you very much for having me. I think I relate so much to the both of you because I come from an indigenous community in Malaysia. I come from the Kelabit people. We're only about 6,000 to 8,000 people in the whole wide world. Wow. And I think similarly, when you think of Malaysia, a lot of times what is advertised is only the majority group. So you have the Malays, the Indians, and the Chinese, but we have so many other indigenous groups or sub-ethnic groups that have that richness of culture and unique traditions within their own communities. And I think that is at risk of being lost or forgotten in sometimes in the name of nationalism. But I think also when we understand our diversity and understand the need to look for our heritage and who we are, that opens our eyes to see the issues or understand the values of our own people. I think one very important thing that I started to find out about my own self is when you think about the Kelabit people in Borneo, we often hear of them as headhunters. And a lot of people are like, oh, that's so exotic, that's so cool. Some people even say, but do you know what? Headhunters talk about a lot of death. There was a lot of conflict amongst our people and our tribes. But we were also, at some point, a people of peace because there was a very important thing that happened, which is the peacemaking. Where all the tribes came together and decided no more killing will be done. And what does that say when we look at the global things that are happening in conflict? And how can we return to our values and say, what did our ancestors do to bring them to the table to come to peace? You know, we were known to kill each other. How? And I think when we examine that in the same way that Pak Hilma talks about how the indigenous people have a connection to the land, how they care for that. So how do we come to peace? There are values within our own lineages and our own heritage that we can examine and search for to find solutions for the future, for current day solutions and problems and issues. But also, our language is also endangered. It is formally classified as endangered because there are so few people who speak it, myself included. I was born outside of the village and so did not have the opportunity to learn it or be in an environment to learn it. But as I grew up and started to understand how linked we are to our language, you know, it doesn't exist in isolation. It's so much a part of our culture. And a lot of the work that I do in filmmaking and also in publishing is to preserve that and to keep it alive. I think preserving is a very loaded word because sometimes you can suggest that the thing is dead. But revive it and keep it alive and make sure that it stays relevant for the future generations. And that's something that I'm very passionate about.
Yeah. Before I go to you, so Sarah, is your, I guess we call it tribe, right? Is there any connection to Dayak, our Dayak people? Because looking at your top and then your accessories is somewhat,
Yes, very
reminds me
much.
of,
Very
Dayak.
much. Actually, the kampong or the village that I come from borders with Kalimantan. You can actually walk over to North Kalimantan.
Wow.
And we do have family in the Indonesian side simply because borders were just drawn right in the middle of our land. So we really are one people. And so I remember I was in Palangkaraya last year, and I felt like I was among family. They brought me around to see, would you like to buy souvenirs? I'm like, everything you get here, I have also. But it was so beautiful to find that shared heritage. And we really, I found myself so at home.
Wow.
Yes, so very much, yes, we are there too.
Well, welcome back. Well, okay, over to you. Share more about you.
My goodness, can I just very quickly add on, because Brunei is on Borneo Island as well. Sorry, is this mic on? Yes, it is on. That Brunei actually, okay, first off, a lot of people think Brunei is rich. Bruneians are very rich. I am here to debunk that and say not all of us are rich. I am from a middle class family. But the culture, when asked what is the culture in Brunei, we often just refer to MIB. MIB means Melayu Islam Berada. So there's a king. It's mostly an Islamic nation. And we have the Pok Pok, the ethnic group are Malay. And because I grew up only knowing that, I had actually not known, we call it the Brunei bubble, not known that Bruneian heritage also actually includes Bornean heritage. So I love it when I meet people from Borneo because I learn so much more about the world that I live in. And that's exactly what culture is. It's a lived experience. Going back to the fact that I grew up in a middle-class family, my parents are both teachers. So they had actually they had trained me from the very, when I was a kid, to learn the English language. So speak English at home, learn Malay outside of the home. But that didn't work. That didn't work, and that actually made me feel distant from Bruneian culture or Bornean culture or whatever. And that is exactly why I started Kitani Creators. I've always been arts and creative based, and I use that as a way to get connected to my own culture and share that with the other Bruneians who are also struggling with finding what Bruneian culture means to them.
What don't we know about Brunei other than they're not all part of the Sultan family? Or
I like the
have
nervous laughter in the room.
or have house apartments in London.
Okay. I am very aware that this is also recorded, but the fact remains that I know a lot of Bruneians who are related to the royal family. But the classes all differ. For example, in my documentary that I'm working on, Ecosystem Rasa, we went to the border between Brunei and Limbang to find a practitioner of gula ana, which is sugar that you can tap from mangrove trees.
Gula lontar, yeah.
Oh, is that what you guys call it? From mangrove trees?
I think so. Yeah, I think. No, it's different. Oh, okay.
And I felt like I was transported into a different world. It genuinely felt like that. So we talk about how Brunei is very small, the population is small, but I always say that if you listen close enough, you look close enough, you observe close enough, you stay close to the communities outside of your own, you learn so much more about Brunei and hence Bruneian culture.
Interesting. So what I can connect from everyone here is that we're trying to go back to our roots, right? In a way, despite we're living in the capital city, we're more global in a way. We're more connected to people outside our country. But at the end of the day, we want to come back to the root and basically just to try to make it alive, right? In a way, it's like that. So I guess in each of your efforts, you told me a little bit about what you did back in Cambodia. But what can you do more? I guess to push that out, that roots out back in what you do. So it's not gone, and then more people are aware of it. Lakan, whoever wants to answer first. Let's just make it an open discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can go first. So I think for me, a very powerful medium is definitely the performing arts and the creative industries. I think that those things are very attractive as an entry point to connect people to their culture and their roots. A lot of times, the work that I do, I try to do it in a way that would create curiosity, not so much about my own culture, but for people to examine their own. You know, if you can see someone else and be fascinated that someone has this kind of history and that kind of culture, what does mine look like? And even in the books that I publish a series of children's bilingual books in a very, very simple form. You know, the words are like, this is my family. And, you know, how do you say that in Kalabit, you know, that sort of a thing.
Kalabit, that's your
that's
native
our
language.
native language, yes. And when people look at it, a lot of times they tell me, oh, this is so simple. You know, I also can do. I'm like, yes, that's the point. You know, because I would like someone to look at that kind of a material and see that this is something that I too can adapt for my own culture. Because we are all, in the end of the day, we are all responsible to carry this responsibility to continue our culture, to pass it on to the next generation. It's not our responsibility alone. And so I think that in the way that we create our work and the way that we work with communities as key collaborators in our work, and I think that that inspires other people to carry on the work that we do and be an extension of that or be part of that ecosystem of all of us gathering together and looking back for our roots and finding ways that we connect in your own art forms and to disseminate that into the world and to the next generation.
Mm-hmm. So do people in Sarawak still speak that language?
Very few, very, very few. And I think that it really is a struggle because so much of us move out of the city to make a living, move out of the village, sorry, to make a living. And so you're not in an environment that is conducive to speaking the language. But more and more I find young people like myself, either living in the cities or from mixed heritage backgrounds, who are looking to connect with their culture.
Right.
And so little things like this is very helpful. We've also turned it into an animated audiobook so that you can hear it and read it and you know, share it with your children, share it with the grandparents, and those become starting points for the stories to be shared.
Right.
Yes, thank you. So culture is not an object of preservation. It's something that we embrace with ourselves and we go together, we appreciate every day. Otherwise become stone for something like that. Yeah, but for us, we try to build a bridge connecting our memory, cultural memory, to the young people. So they discover, they accept, they embrace or not embrace. If they like it, they can embrace it. If not, they cannot. So we collect audiovisual memory in film, photography, and sound. We curate film screening followed by discussion.
Mm-hmm. This is from that part of the history, from during the Khmer Rouge era?
We have remaining film that we collected from around the world about Cambodia. Some film also alive, but they were alive because they were sent out of Cambodia before the Khmer Rouge. So we could collect those material and program film screening and discussion so that we allow young people to understand what it was like, how Cambodia was like, and what is the culture. Because in film you see a lot of art form there, so we can pick many things to talk and discuss. So we do like film screening in community also. We have mobile cinema. So we bring films, not only bring film to community where they don't access to theater. So we screen in open air, and people watch it, enjoy it, laugh together, and some people come up, oh yes, it was something like that when I was young, but now we don't see it anymore. Something like this. And also we try to do some other platform, like we create an application right now because young people have mobile phone. So we create an application we call Khmer Rouge History Application. We aim to educate young people about the history of the Khmer Rouge.
In your language?
Yeah, in Khmer English, and it will be in Japanese, it will be in German, in Khmer, but So now available in Khmer and English on iOS, and on Android you can access Japanese. Yeah. So because the idea is that we want young people to understand the history that understand by the public is not the history narrated by the state. So I think that every Southeast Asian country learn the history narrated by the state. But we do more in public history, and we want to also share our understanding on history. So we create this kind of thing, and I think that maybe, according to the statistic, maybe 100,000 downloads on the App Store and Play Store. So please feel free to download if you want to understand.
I will
One
download
of your
it right
friends
now.
in Southeast Asia, Cambodia, you can watch film. You can access to photography, sound archive, written text, memory of Khmer Rouge survivor, and we have hundreds of documentary films made by our students, by indigenous students, and professional filmmaker available there, things that explain the history.
Okay, this is the former state official speaking. Yeah. But I totally agree with you. No. I totally agree with you that the need to create new narratives about ourselves, which are based not necessarily on the existing archives, but to create your own archives. Take example that we discussed, like how indigenous communities relate to forests. There is a huge, enormous repository of knowledge that hasn't been documented. And then that's a loss because we are rapidly losing that. The loss of language on a very great scale. People are dying, younger people are going to the cities, etc. So we are now in a middle of a process of transition. I think the interest now in revitalizing culture, etc., also comes from there. And I think COVID has a very important role. People begin to understand that the limitations of modernity, of modern life, the hyper-modernity that we are living right now. So, and there is this huge interest now, I think, People are looking back into their history, into their roots, their origins, and all these stories, trying to collect and then build and counter archives, which would balance the way we think about the world, and the way we behave, etc. So I think what we are witnessing here together is this, like examples now, people trying to do things at the grassroots level, at different levels, and I think it's great to see more initiatives like this brought together on a platform that would be accessible to more and more people. So this is, I think, also the way to go. And talking about like modern technology, the use of AI, etc. But before coming here this morning, I was watching this interesting documentary on like how AI could contribute to all these like issues, and it's an exciting time that we're actually living in right now, with all these like different initiatives, and I'd like to hear more from you as well in the audience.
Pahiamat, what was the challenge when you were still in the ministry to imbue a knowledge or like about our culture within the curriculum of the middle school? What was the challenge then? Because for me, I don't see enough of our history, I guess, or even the culture itself.
Different levels. One of the key problems was perspective. In most cases, I think other Southeast Asian nations have all these similar problems. The idea is to preserve culture. Culture is something that belongs to the past, and it's for us now to bring it here. While I think culture is a living thing, and we do agree about that, right? So the question is not whether we need to impose knowledge about culture in the past to today's society, but how to make it relevant. Culture changes. It's the way the traditional dances that you see today are completely different from 100 years ago. 100 years ago, no one wears batik as a shirt. It's only for the ground for the dress down there, right? But now it's a norm. Yeah, so culture always develops, and this is, I think, the approach that we should take. And that's why when I was at the ministry, my suggestion to the curriculum people is to look at the daily practices. Yeah, not so much in the museums. Yeah, museums was invented because people in the West didn't know about us, right? That the original name for the museums was the Cabinets of Curiosities, right? Because they found it some strange alien thing that they want to preserve. But for us, it's part of the daily life, right? Yeah. So yeah, different approach, I would say. Yeah.
The question is, what I do more of in my practice, right?
It's difficult to connect to your roots and then show it to the world or to your society.
So because I come from the background of I don't know what my roots are, I'm figuring that out myself. But in my practice, when I meet these people who are custodians of culture and traditional knowledge, I am also asking myself, like, what else can I do to help them realize that they have the power themselves to continue on, to preserve, to reimagine, and they're always usually so happy to be supported. They're happy to share because they just don't know how. And I'll give you an example. I had a Kurdish maker. Kurdish is a type of sword, for those of you who aren't familiar, traditional sword. So there are only two left in Brunei. Yeah, it's crazy because I know Indonesians, there are so many Kurdish makers.
We just have too many Javanese in this country, yeah, including me.
I didn't know that. Thank you for letting me know. But one of them, who's I think in his 40s, had come to us and was like, I want to preserve this. What can I do? And I said, I suggested a few things. But the one that landed with him the most was a book. And I said, okay, I can help you write it. And then he said, I don't want to write it. I don't want to, I don't think in words, and it takes too much it's too long of a process, and I'm not used to writing anything. And I was stumped because I want to help you. I want to support in any way that I can. And it has made me a bit more reflective too, because this is not my story. It's not my story to tell. And I'm trying to also figure out, like, within the system that we work in, which is ultimately a colonial system, when we talk about intellectual property with these books, with these cultures, there's the option of ghostwriting. I don't want to do that. There's also the issue of, if I write this book, or if we write it together, I will still benefit. And I don't want to benefit from it. I want you to benefit from this. So what we ended up doing was we're going to sit down in an interview. I interviewed him, and he talked about his whole process, and that itself is a book. So it doesn't have to be like a very formal document that details how to do this or what is the history. It's literally about his lived experience with this piece of culture, with this asset. So the question is, again, what can I do more of? And I think I speak on behalf of so many people who help platform. I think being reflective and learning the humility to say no, that's not for me to do. It's something that you should be doing. You should be doing benefiting from this. The second one that I wanted to say is, I think very similar to Pak Hilmar said, something about changing the mindset. I am trying to figure out as well how to get people to realize that these custodians of culture or traditions are not old-fashioned, because they look at it through that lens. Like, it's part of history. How do you modernize it? Do you need to modernize it in the first place? Can we learn to appreciate what they have first and then see what are the possible pathways? It doesn't have to necessarily be progress to just all the time. But I'm so young. My practice, I said, is unfolding as I go along. And yeah, I enjoy this conversation that we're having because I get to learn so much from all of you.
Okay. So we also have discussants who are here with us. We have, okay, I have the name? I do have the name. I know you're one of them. So let's just give the mic to you and say hello to everyone, your affiliation, and then if you have questions or comments or anything, please do.
Hi, everybody, and everybody in the room. My name is Anastasia. I'm the National President of the Australia-Indonesia Youth Association. So just a little bit about myself. It's my position is a bit interesting. So I was born and raised in Indonesia. However, I moved to Australia at a young age. And I echo with a lot of the things that you guys have said, which is connecting to my roots, as you can visibly tell. I like to say performative Indonesian. And I guess a lot of the things that I've written down a few things, but I feel like a lot of the key points that everybody has touched on in some way or another is that there is a lot of politics of decolonization and legacy of empire. So as you said, the way that we think that First Nations or Indigenous knowledges are backwards, that's something that we need to shift. Even things like oral history as something, we're going to lose it, but oral history has existed for thousands of years, right? Looking at, potentially I'm biased, but looking at, even though Australia is not perfect, there's things like land management and recognising elders in Australia that we do, and, controlled burnings that we do, which is an Indigenous practice that now the Australian government has adopted. So that's definitely things that we can look into as a forum of discussion. I do want to bring up, however, the politics of recognition and exclusion, which I feel like is also a legacy of colonisation. As you said, that looks like a Dayak, but the only reason why that's potentially Dayak versus, what was your native? Kalabit, excuse me, is because of the boundary line, right, and because of administration. And this is something that has happened in Indonesia, where religion and incorporation into the nation state is a big deal. If you are a recognised First Nations person, you potentially have funding. But if you are not part of a group that's recognised, you do not get funding. And so that is a question that I will bring up later down the line, which I am interested in hearing what you guys will have to say. Lastly is also the funding, which I just touched on. I feel like in Australia, learning Japanese, Korean and Mandarin, and potentially I might be censored because I'm recognised as recorded, is very much funded by the government. And so the support that I get in trying to promote Indonesian language, Indonesian culture and diplomacy is actually from the Australian government. And it's a lot harder to try and push that because we don't have that support. And so to recognise what a lot of you guys have said is that there needs to be, I feel like, not only a top-down approach, but also bottom-up, which we've talked about in this conference, where people are at the centre, which causes a lot of issues such as brain drain and people leaving. So as I said, the question that I have is, how do you see this politics of inclusion and exclusion, where recognition is very important, recognising First Nations people and culture, but automatically by recognising some people or religions or cultures, you're excluding others. So how do we navigate this in a way that's inclusive and diverse and, accessible to all people? Thank you.
Thank you. I guess, Sarah, you want to start first?
That's a very, very difficult question to answer because it is a very complex issue, to say the least, because, I think for so long, minority communities, not just Indigenous communities, have been searching for that recognition and funding. And I don't think that you can ever segment a people group without excluding another. Where then does that leave us, right? And I think, like you said so aptly, that we cannot keep looking at a top-down approach. Of course, that is very helpful, and it helps move things in a fast way sometimes. But then we also have to look inward and ask ourselves, what can we do? If these things didn't exist, what can we do? And I think that was something that I was faced with because a very interesting thing about my background, I'm not 100% Kalabit. My father is of Indian heritage, Malaysian Indian heritage, and my mother is of Kalabit heritage. I had to fight to be recognized as Kalabit, although as an Indigenous person, that is my right to be recognized as Indigenous. At every part of my life, I had to file a new form of documentation. Even just this year, I had to file a documentation to prove my native status, which would guarantee me the ability to inherit land from my elders. These things are so complex, right? And so in that process, I asked myself, what can I do when I'm not given these recognitions and when I'm not given these opportunities for my own community? And what I found the best way to do that is to return to your community. You know why? Because your community is your support. And how does that start? It starts by sitting with your elders and asking them what their life is like, what are their issues, what are the things that concern them, and then you get ideas of how to mobilize, ideas of what can you do first as an individual, then what can you do with people who feel the same way, and then how can we reach into each other's pockets and bring something together, or how can we reach into our friends' pockets and bring something together, and then we look at the community. What are they existingly doing that we can support or that we can add on, that we can extend? I think when we start from there, then the recognition tends to come after. I think we have to see how can we pull our own weight in those kind of situations. It's not ideal, but when we do that, then I notice that the recognition follows, the funding follows. People be like, hey, you're doing something interesting. I'd like to be a part of that. And I think those are the times that then we can say, yes, we invite them into our spaces and into the community and get them to be a part of that. I personally found that way quite effective and also very fulfilling because you're not really relying on an outsider to help you progress.
Right. Yeah. You must have. Do you have challenges in terms of funding to preserve or try to secure?
Yes, we
project?
have a lot of challenges as most funding is from the external funder, and the state does not have a lot of investment on this. But some funder like Australia, some foundation like Wiki Foundation, Ford Foundation, and many others, that they also prioritize the knowledge of indigenous people, for example. So I'll give you an example that we try to do inclusion. So a project we implemented to support indigenous people, we call building the capacity of indigenous people and creating indigenous archive in using Wikimedia tools. So in this approach, we provide film training program to indigenous youth from different minority groups. There are some small and some big. And we teach them in cinematography, editing, sound recording, and directing. After training program, we ask them to go back to their community to make film with their community, with their parents or grandparents, documenting everyday life and culture. Ritual ceremony is very important, and it's on the way of losing, because this ritual ceremony is connected with nature, with forest, mountain, waterfall. So when this kind of thing is conquered, is taken out, they will lose. So they document this thing. We teach them a way that making film with people, not making film about people. So mean that the people who are in the film and the filmmaker, they are the custodians of the culture, and they share ownership. So they join together, they work together. Imagine that we screen the film on the screen, and the people in the film say, yeah, this is my film. Even they are the people in the film, because they share together, and so things belong together. So these young people, indigenous people, they make film in their own language. If they go to Krung community, they are Krung youth, they make film in Krung language, in Tempun language, in Charai language. So Charai is similar to Bahasa. Some word counting from 1 to 20, very similar. My friends there, who is Indonesian, went to Charai community with me, and they count from 1 to 20, and very similar. Sati, hello.
Interesting. So, okay, so you're very strategic with the budget if you transfer the knowledge first, right? Okay. We have another discussion here. Let's just bring another ASEAN member from the Philippines. We have Christian Cordero. Where are you, Christian? Okay. Christian, you have comments or anything?
Thank you. I'd like to comment on the use of the forest. I think that's striking, and yesterday when we had a screening, I invited people to think of cinema as some kind of a forest, where you enter into such a space where things can become strange, but you just proceed and go and find your way out of the forest. Uh, for the question, like the Philippines, Cambodia, and Indonesia, we have some shared history of violence and trauma. And you may know that the Philippines has witnessed the rise of Duterte, the return of the Marcos. I'd like to ask our Indonesian colleague and the Cambodian colleague as to how do we deal with trauma, with historical trauma and violence, and try to memorialize it when people in power are still around us.
Okay, Pak Humar, you can go first.
Okay, make sure this is recorded. So yeah, Indonesia had episodes like of traumatic episodes of violence, and one of the largest was the 1965 and 66 mass killings, where no less than approximately like 1 million people perished because of the political change that took place at that time. We are still grappling with that, like how to deal with this. There have been good novels, like fictional works, documentaries, like created on that subject. But I think the biggest problem is that the people who were perpetrators at that time are still in power. Yeah. So you are finding it difficult even to speak about it. Although younger people after 98, after the change of the government, reformasi and all that, had courage to speak up, like victims of violence come forward, step forward, and then tell their stories, etc. But I think in general, there's still this denial of what actually happened. Yeah? And this denial is rooted very much to the very legitimacy of the political order at the time, and even today. So we are in a very dynamic situation, so to say. And I think one of the largest challenges that we confront today is to find the language, like how should we talk about this? Yeah, I am from a generation like born after 1965. My father was not related to any of that. Many younger people now are, born like way after that. No direct connection. And interestingly, and this is taking place in the last 5 years or so, like people, Gen X, Gen Z, sorry, Gen Z, young people who begin to speak up and are telling us, Gen X and others, don't tell us how to think about history, which is a very important move, I think, right? Because the Gen X and even before that, like we are still quarreling about politics, Cold War, and et cetera, ideologies, et cetera. While for young people of today, what has this to do with me? Yeah, what is the relevance of all that? Like how can we move on to embrace the future? I mean, if we are still stuck with that kind of like quarrel of the past. And this is a new thing I begin to see, like from younger people, which is very good. Yeah, I mean, as I said, like before, I mean, we need all the time to rewrite our history. Yeah, which is useful for us in our lives today, instead of like trying to impose your truth on future generations. Yeah, so we don't know the outcome yet. Yeah, I think Philippines is still grappling with that too, right? Yeah, from the years of dictatorship and all that. But I think there is hope as we see younger people of today and how they deal with this historical issues. And lots of interesting initiatives. Cannot go into detail, but they're happy to share with you after this.
David?
Thank you. Very important question. But let me share the context of Cambodia. The Khmer Rouge took power for 3 years, and then they were pushed out in 1979 by the Cambodian group of Cambodians supported by Vietnam. where Southeast Asian at that time called it Vietnamese invasion in Cambodia. So here in international context, perhaps you call it Vietnamese invasion in Cambodia at that time. But for the local context, they call liberation, because many people were almost lost their life or were killed during the time. My parent-in-law were placed in the ditch already, waiting for being killed. But at about lunchtime, when Vietnamese opened their attack, and then the Khmerus, the perpetrators, just run away. So they survived. That's why my parent-in-law said this is liberation. So there's two different contexts. Yeah, but I think most of the Khmer leaders were pushed out of the power and living along Cambodian-Thai border as a form of guerrilla fighter. Then in 1998, all the movement were ended. Negotiation came, and after that, in 2006, we invented the International Court of Justice, supported by UN and also the local government, bringing only the top responsible leaders to be tried. So, Khmerus, they have big group of people, but we cannot trial all those people, so there is no reconciliation. We cannot have peace. So that they decided to bring only the most responsible leader to be tried. So finally, 5 of them were brought to be tried and sentenced for life in prison. And the people who were part of Soya, Katre, something like that, in Cambodia, we don't call them a part of perpetrator. We have one term, Khmer survivor. So either the victim or the not victim, former Katre, but they received the order from the top. So we impress each other by calling like Khmer survivor, and we move together. So hatred is eliminated because they did not want to do. They said that they were asked to do it. It's the order. So we embrace something like that, and we can move together. And then after 2006, a lot of initiatives were made in order to connect younger generation to the elder, to understand what it's like. Because like I mentioned, Cambodians carry trauma, and parents did not want to talk about it, keep it in their heart, unless they feel safe space, unless they feel that the young people want to listen. And if young people reject, they have double trauma. One is that they carry things in themselves, and one, their story is rejected. So we create kind of environment where young people can listen, where they feel that they can share. So that we have a project called Acts of Memory, a project where we support young people, especially family members, who wanted to understand their parents' story, who went through the civil war and genocide. And we train them in some history, art of journalism, asking questions. Frankly, art of asking questions, how to listen, how to do follow-up questions, and some psychological, some trauma reaction. And then they can talk to their parent or grandparent whether you would like to do conversation, whether the conversation can be recorded or not. But if they agree, we send team to record the conversation. So we conduct around 100 conversations, and now we expanded to Cambodia, who left to Cambodian community outside Cambodia because they ran away from the Khmer.
Yeah, the diaspora. Yeah.
And now young people who grew up in Japan, they know nothing about Cambodia, but they grew up with different color of the skin. Before they thought they're Japanese, but after that, no, they are not. So where they come from? They ask their parents questions. So when they started to ask their parents questions, it brought us a question: how can we reconnect?
Right.
This.
Interesting. Okay, let's bring in there's somebody from Vietnam, also a writer and director, Lê Tan Hăng. Okay, that's you. And then also there's one from Malaysia. Maybe you can share. Yes. So for strategic time.
I'm sorry, but I'm not the director and the writer. No, I'm the producer of the film. So hello, everyone. I'm here today, and I have no questions for the panelists, but I have some comments and ideas. From my background, I was studying urban planning and especially in public art. Today, I really appreciate your discussions as well the topics that you can share, and greatly thank you for, especially for Sohee. Your application is amazing. And I think I would like to address 2 points for our future culture reservation, especially target to young people, because I'm the young generation. I was born in 1993, not very young anymore, but I relate to young people a lot. I think there's 2 things that we should talk about. First, accessibility. Second, openness. From Vietnam side, I share the same divisive look about history between Vietnam and Cambodia, and as well as the civil war we call now Vietnam War. Now in my country, I am aware that this is recording, and hopefully this is a safe space for me to speak out. The accessibility for young people in Vietnam in general is not very open, and I hope that we can learn from your application in the future. The second thing is about the openness. I think this is a ground to openness, and this is a rare chance for me to be here as a Vietnamese to open up about this. I think we should connect in the dots as well. Now, from my side, because I work in film industry and advertising as well, so I am in touch with young people. They need to have a reason. They need to have a reason to embrace the culture that they are growing up with, as well as the neighborhood culture. They need to know the reason why. They need to see that we, as an ASEAN community, we have soft power. I want to bring the soft power topic because, as we can see, Japan has their own soft power, and that power is so powerful. It still impacts every country now. I think all of us here, 11 countries, we also have our soft power, but the accessibility is not very open yet. Not yet, but I hope for the future that we can have more and more accessibility and openness for young people to talk, to have a reason, and also to have tools to start practice daily. I think we should have more practical tools to guide our young generation, how to approach the culture reservation. Is there any better way, not just in this room, but outside the room? Because I study public art, there's one thing that public art can help young people. That's because it's public art. You can't avoid it. You walk by and then you see a memorial. You walk by and then you see a mural about war, about loss, about trauma, about your beautiful tapestry of patterns and everything. That's the power of the public art. This morning, I walk out and I visit the Senayan City Plaza, and I see a lot of LED screens, but it's for commercials. How can we utilize those screens and then send messages to the young people? That's from my side. Thank you.
Thank you. Now from you, from Malaysia.
Hi everyone, my name is Azim Rizal. I'm a film director from Malaysia. Not as prominent as Sarah, I'm only starting out. But yeah, I come from a mixed race background of Malay and Indian. And as a filmmaker, I'm leaning more towards bringing a lot of the Indian stories, especially from my family as well. I want to divert this discussion more towards how to deal with privately owned cultural or heritage sites. How do you deal with that? Because this is more of an advice for myself, a question for me as well. Have you guys ever dealt with those type of things, dealing with corporations or dealing with companies who own these sites that might mean a lot more to certain families or certain races? Has there been pushback before? Because there is some parts of KL that are connected to my family that I feel that are forgotten. Certain parts have been turned to pickleball courts. And yeah, I just want to bring those stories out. How do I approach that? How do I approach these companies to get these stories of to my family out as well?
So to make it more inclusive, you mean? Okay. Do you have any experience in that, Sarah? Mungkin Pak Hilmar?
Well, not particularly in that context. I think in Kuala Lumpur, is it your family? In Kuala Lumpur, I think there has been a shift in preservation of heritage, particularly family stories. And I think there are certain organizations that might be helpful to mediate these conversations. That might be helpful. But also, I think sometimes it really boils down to I work very closely with my husband, who's also a film producer and an executive producer, and he has this thing that he lives by, and he says, if you don't try, you never know. and we always go knocking on doors to get stories told with the knowledge, the full knowledge that we may be rejected and rejected very badly. But the question of what if we can actually find a way is always there. And I think for us, we continue to always knock doors, bang them, kick them down if we need to, sometimes to get those stories told. And I must acknowledge, it is very, very hard, especially for the Indian community in Malaysia for those stories. But I would really encourage you to knock those doors and we can have more of a conversation later.
I can just very quickly add on, because you're working particularly in film, correct? And then this film has an impact element to it. I would suggest as well to think about the impact campaign before the film even before you even enter the production side. So this could look like a very expensive R&D phase, but using that impact value or planning what that impact campaign might look like from the very beginning to sell to the use that as an idea to sell to the corporations.
Mahimar, you want to share more? We do have a lot of cases on that, I believe, like any kind of like IP for culture or history that is pretty much privatized. No?
Yeah, but it's still very much in the beginning of that. I mean, like when I was still at the ministry, we created this endowment fund. Yeah, and I think that was probably one of the best things that I actually did when I was still at the ministry, because it allows people like you, like great initiatives who would otherwise never get funding to be funded. Yeah, so that was the objective really of the fund. We would go into experimental or like anything that otherwise would never get funding. Yeah, so that was the objective really. But yeah, and now I'm no longer with the government. I have the same problem. Yeah, I want to pitch my ideas to corporations, banks, etc., and the fact that they are not bankable. I mean, they are not viable for business, etc. So it's a challenge, really. But I think the key thing here is really to work together, yeah, as a community. I mean, if you approach it individually, then you would see enormous challenge. But once you are part of a larger community like this, yeah, ASEAN level, etc., I think it's very important to voice this, right? And these are important things because, to be honest, corporations are slow in thinking with all their discourse of innovation and all that. They're always behind. Yeah, it's the artists, the creative people, who are at the forefront of everything. They are the ones who would go into these unknown, uncharted territories. Yeah, losing a lot money, time, etc., etc. But yeah, so to connect that and to bring that back to the decision makers, yeah, to convince them, and this is also why networking is so very important. I will comment a little bit about us being concerned, this being recorded, etc. Not that I'm afraid of anything, but what I mean is that to create safe spaces, this is also very important. Yeah, for creative people to work together at the ASEAN level, for example, like a conference like this, very, very useful, right? To bring all these like good ideas, to speak freely about it, and then come up with something interesting, something useful, inspiring, etc. So, I think for the organizers of this, my message would be create, make it happen more often. That's one, and also probably special sessions on things like this, where we can go deeper, yeah, into what is being thought of, yeah, and have like really, really long discussions about that. That would be really helpful in making this happen and also addressing your concern to make it known to a larger public.
Yeah, I always feel like Southeast Asia, we're not sort of like narrative, but we're lacking of narrative. Yeah. So we have less and less of like in our language in Bahasa Indonesia is tukang cerita, people who share the story in a form of documentary film, whatever, right? Whatever form that needs to be pushed out there. So I guess my last question, just to conclude our discussion here, starting from you, Pa, and then ends with you, Nur, right? What kind of narrative should we send out to the outside world, outside ASEAN, among ourselves, within the ASEAN region, or even beyond that, that needs to be out there? So we know people from the EU, we know people from the Americas, Latin America, but who are the Southeast Asians? What do people need to know, that we can push out there?
Very simple. I'll let them speak. Because this region has been spoken of. I mean, if you look at the history, like pick any history book on Southeast Asian history, well, probably it would be written by someone who's not from Southeast Asia. And we, in fact, know so little about each other. And it's all like the knowledge being accumulated, organized, like not here, but in the US, Australia, etc. So to reclaim back that voice is very important. I cannot say that who, but it's a polyphonic. we celebrate like different voices. So the question is not like who is going to tell the story, but how are you going to tell the story? Like through what kind of platform, through what kind of mechanism, which would allow different voices to emerge. Because Southeast Asia is so rich. It's hard really to find a single voice to represent everything. And I think in today's world with all this digital technology, etc., which is very fast, like polyphonic is actually very possible. The idea of having different voices to emerge at the same time.
Something?
I think that I agree with you. Let people of Southeast Asia or ASEAN speak for themselves. So our approach is, like I say, make film with people, that we want people to tell the story of their issues. It's not story about their culture, but story about what they are facing, they are challenging, like climate change, deforestation, natural resource exploitation. And so they can talk about it. Beautiful, concern. So but thing is that we need to have a space where they can push out. So there in Cambodia, I create small platform for local, but I also try to create a platform where international or friends from around the region can access to. So the work that our young people created, we place on internet, on a website where people can check out. And I think that perhaps if we are able to create a place or a website where Cambodia can post the content from Cambodia, where Indonesia can post on the same, so that we have a joint platform, see Cambodia, Indonesia, and Philippines, Malaysia, contents there. So we can learn from each other and, learn to accept, embrace each other. And in Cambodia, I organize a Cambodia International Film Festival, in which a small section we call Beautiful Planet, where we usually invite filmmakers from the region who talk about things beautiful planet, environment, and stuff like that. And they come in, they talk, they share with Cambodian audience and other international audience there. So we connect, we meet, we talk, and we learn from each other.
Not bad. I think in the context of ASEAN, we are stronger together in terms of sharing our identity to the world. And I think there are three main things that can help us achieve this. The first is having a convergence point. Something like this, or something like a film festival, or smaller festivals in the region where we invite each other to come and discuss and exchange ideas and meet and have that safe space. And then collaboration between the countries, whether it's co-production or whether it is artist residencies in each other's countries, or exchange of artists to work on each other's culture, because that's where the exchange happens. That's where we can share resources, and that's where each of us have our own strengths. For example, Indonesia has the volume of people. Malaysia is not really a cinema-going audience, but if you do a co-production with Indonesia, chances are you would have more resource, but also sharing of that heritage across borders, with Thailand adopting best practices. We share so much with each other. And then also keeping our communities in mind. At the end of the day, these co-productions or these collaborations must benefit our communities, because that is where the continuity happens. We need to pass on that same flame that we have to the community so that they can replicate these three things for themselves. And I think if we do that, without us trying so hard, people will look at Southeast Asia or ASEAN and be like, what is happening here? There is a fire going on because we are working with each other.
I think everything that I wanted to say has been said, so I think my one is going to be very simple. Question what you know about Southeast Asia, and question why you yourself think that way. You can have the best education in the world. You can know the most about Southeast Asia. You can know the most. Full stop. But if you don't decolonize your mind, what is it all used for? Especially if you're talking about communities outside of your own communities. Maybe you are part of that community, but you yourself have not been colonized. And I think shared values, operate on shared values and respect and curiosity. Thank you so much.
Well, I guess also just I want to touch upon that curiosity. I believe even among Indonesians, we don't know a lot about people from outside Indonesia other than Singapore, I guess, right? Because it's the closest one. Or Malaysia, just KL, not beyond that yet, I believe, right? So I guess that curiosity has to be also pushed by, connectivity. It makes us easier to travel around without just having to transit in Singapore, let's say. So that also can be done from people to people, to open up that curiosity and, just to have more network, I guess, right? More friends in the region, and hopefully can create something together, whether it's in whatever form that is possible. So thank you so much to all the speakers who shared their perspective and vision. Thank you so much. I believe the time is already up, so I'll give the floor back to the MC.
Thank you so much for the panelists. And before closing the session, we invite panelists to go down and stand in front of the stage.